Welcome back for our, what is this? Oh my God, is this our 15th episode of Two Crime Besties?
Yay!
Hi, Emma.
Hey, Meg, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Very good. I'm very excited to be here for episode 15. I feel like it was only days ago that we were recording like episode 1 and 2. And now we're at episode 15, so that's really exciting.
Yeah. It's rolling along so smoothly now. It's like just this is our routine and this is what we do and I love it.
Me too.
Yep. Fridays are my favourite day of the week.
Me too.
Well, that's our record day. Tuesdays are my second favourite day because we release our new one.
So stay tuned.
Yes.
Every Tuesday we release our new episode. And yeah, this one's going to be a good one. Today we're talking about Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Dee Dee Blanchard. So I think it's probably the most famous Munchausen by proxy case, known around the world.
Yep.
Yeah, but before we get into that, how has your week been?
Yeah, pretty good. I've had sick kids this week and stuff like that. So it's been the juggle, managing work and kids and stuff like that. But yeah, no, not a bad week. We had, what about you? What have you been up to? You had a cool weekend last weekend, I reckon.
We did have a great
weekend. We haven't
weekend.
caught up on it yet.
No. So this was part of our media blackout just so that we could have something to talk about on the podcast. So for my birthday this year, my husband and kids gave me a picnic treasure hunt. It's such a great concept, but basically there's a company there's pretty much only one company, I think, really around the traps that do it. It's called Amazing Co.
Oh, yeah.
We're not sponsored by them, but hell, if they wanted to sponsor us, please
Love
do.
A picnic.
We had such a great day. So the premise behind it is you nominate the day that you're going to do the picnic and the region. So the company, we're based in Victoria in Australia, and there are lots of different regions around the state where you can do it. And we chose to do it in the Macedon Ranges because that's not a place that we go to very often. And so it starts off the night before and they send you a message and you get a clue and you've got to solve the clue so that you can get your the first destination.
Yeah.
And it tells you roughly like a time frame in which to be there. So we trot on off, and the first stop for us was Trentham. And we picked up a little picnic basket thing with some cheese and biscuits and some olives, I think. And then you get your next clue. You have to solve that.
Oh,
and
pressure. What if you don't solve the clue?
Mate, it's actually like if you don't solve the clue, there's something wrong.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, no worries. I might struggle, that's all.
No. The kids were able to sort that out for us.
Oh, wow.
So that was
okay.
really cool.
Love
and
that.
they thought it was great that they could solve it.
Yeah.
And then every place you go to, you pick up another, a few more bits and pieces for your picnic.
Yeah.
One of the stops that we stopped at was a spot just for the kids. It was this really cool cafe in Kyneton.
Yeah.
And they made up like a little kids pack for the kids. And it was really well done.
Aww.
Everywhere we went knew we were coming. And so it was really well organised. And then it ended in a picnic at Hanging Rock.
Oh, lovely. Well,
Yeah.
there's another case for us.
Absolutely. That's what I said. Well, I'm here. I'll need to do a bit of research for a potential future case. But yeah, so it was really good fun.
That's
Fantastic
really
day
awesome.
out. Highly recommend it.
Well done, Peter. Nice
He did
choice.
a great job. I was so stoked when they gave me that for my birthday.
Yeah.
What a lovely day out. And it was a full day. We were gone from sort of 8:30 or so in the morning and home at 4:30. So it was a really great day out.
And I'm guessing you probably tried some different things foods-wise from the region that you otherwise wouldn't even know to go and find.
Yeah,
so
that's it.
really
We
cool.
got some really nice breads and it was just really, really fun. And the weather was beautiful too. I think that helped.
That helps for sure, especially this time of year. You don't know what you're going to get sometimes. But
That's it.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, so lots and lots of fun. And the kids loved it too. I thought I was a bit not worried, but I thought maybe they'd get a bit bored, but they didn't. There was enough for them to keep them entertained and enough stops along the way that, it was really good.
Family day out.
It was really nice.
So wholesome of you all.
Oh, I know, so wholesome. That's us in a nutshell.
Well, some weekends.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out properly.
Definitely give it a go.
Yeah. We might have to do another one, like a girls one or something one weekend in another region.
Yeah. Get some wines.
Oh, so I was going to say, well, top of the list, please.
There was a winery stock in there and we did get a bottle of wine. So
Love that.
it wasn't the worst thing ever.
Uh,
All right, should we get into today's case?
Let's. Oh, well, first of all, I was going to say before we get into the actual topic of the case, let's hit off with just a shout out of hitting up our subscription on that playlist that you're playing on right now, whatever app you're on, hit that subscribe or that follow button because, you know, if you want to come back and listen to the next episode, then you're with us. You're with us.
Yeah.
And it's the best way we can spread it out there.
Yeah, our subscriber base is slowly growing, but we'd really like to see it. We know how many people are listening to every episode, and we don't even have close to that many subscribers.
Yeah.
So if we can kind of build up our subscriber base, it really helps us to get our show out to more people. So yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. No.
Thank
Awesome.
you, everybody.
But let's get into this case. It's a real good, it's a juicy one for sure. And it's certainly like one that's relevant right now, even to this point. So we can start right back to the beginning, but almost don't know where to start with this because I feel like wherever we start, there's kind of like a preamble to that one as well. So everyone sort of has this background history that kind of links to each other.
I feel like we should start with Gypsy's birth and then kind of we can go back and
forwards.
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like that's
needed.
probably the best. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Gypsy was born on the 27th of July in 1991. Her parents were Claudine Blanchard and Rod Blanchard. They'd been married, so at the time of Gypsy's birth, they'd been, within the pregnancy, they'd been married and divorced. So Dee Dee found out she was pregnant. Rod, being a good Christian, well, he was a child, actually.
Yeah.
He was 17 years old when Dee Dee fell pregnant, 18 years old when they got married, and 18 years old by the time, still 18 years old when Gypsy was born. They got married because Dee Dee was pregnant. Rod says he was never really in love with her. I think Dee Dee was hugely in love with him, infatuated with him.
Yeah.
But they got divorced about a month, was it, before Gypsy was born? Not very long before.
There was a bit of an age gap too. Like she was 24, Claudine, at the time, to Ken's Rod. Let's get the names right.
There's
Rod.
so many names
So
in
many
this
names
story.
here. Rod, he was only 17 to her 24. I believe she might have lied about her age and said she was about 21.
She did.
Which, I mean, this day and age, if this was now, we'd all have a bit of an uproar of like this 17-year-old marrying a woman, you know, like in the age gap between them. Like, I mean, I don't know if that was spoken about at the time or what, but probably not.
There was nothing controversial about it, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think because of the fact that they were in this Christian community and she was pregnant, that was what you did. You had to get married. There was sort of no other option.
Yeah.
Rod sort of saw, obviously, throughout those few months that they were married that this wasn't for him. And there are a lot of interviews with him on the internet, on YouTube. You can just Google them. He's a lovely man. I have a real soft spot for him. Every time I see him interviewed or speaking about Gypsy and about Dee Dee even, I have a lot of respect for him.
Absolutely. I think he's a good Southern man, they would say, I guess. Yeah.
Very gentle, very gentlemanly.
Yeah, for sure.
They were married. They get divorced. Gypsy's born. And, I mean,
things start pretty early on.
they really do.
Yeah.
They really, really do.
Yeah, so from 3 months of age, that she was already, Claudine went by the name Dee Dee. So we'll probably refer to her as Dee Dee, I'm guessing, throughout this. So you feel the same. Everything I kept reading was Dee Dee. So she went by the name Dee Dee. So by about 3 months of age, when Gypsy was 3 months of age, she was taking her to the doctors believing there was something wrong with her sleeping, that she had sleep apnea. And Dee Dee she was also previously to this a nurse's assistant. So she had some medical knowledge of sorts, I guess. But so she believed there was something something wrong with the sleeping patterns of Gypsy. But I mean, what 3-month-old doesn't have issues with sleeping? They regress around that stage. All these sorts of things go on. So she did go off to the doctors and they all said there was nothing wrong. But Dee Dee was convinced that there was sleep apnea happening.
Yeah.
So
I guess as a doctor at that point, and especially as the parent of a young child, you have to advocate for your child. So if you see that there's something going on, of course you're going to be pushing and pushing and pushing for that. And I would imagine that the medical professionals, they rely on parental account of what's happening and parental, parents giving an accurate representation of what's happening so that that can assist in their diagnosis.
I've got a perfect analogy of that with like my own child at about, he was about 12 months old, and jumped out of his high chair, and he hurt himself, and I was beside myself, and I could see the way he landed. Because I witnessed it happen, kind of thing. I could see how he landed was very awkward, and how much he was crying at the time. But by the time I got to the hospital, he wasn't crying. And they just said to me, you know, I don't think he's broken anything. He's fine. They checked it. I was more worried about concussion, to be really honest. But I'm like, no, but his hand, he's not like crawling, like he's not putting any pressure on it. They're like, yeah, no, he's fine. It's probably just a bit bruised, bit, you know, just a bit of a strain or something. No worries. And I was like, can we just X-ray it to be sure? And they tried to fob me off and like, no, he's fine. Go home. And I'm like, I would just prefer that if we go home that we've had an X-ray and you've told me it's fine than just walking out of here. They ended up X-raying it, and lo and behold, it was broken. So he'd broken his wrist. So the doctor actually said to me at the time, he goes, I've just learnt a massive lesson to listen to mum. He goes, I really should have heard you and not fobbed you off. I felt, you know, validated at that point that it was broken, but holy crap, my 12-month now has a plastic cast on his arm, and you feel like an awful parent. But yeah, the doctors need to listen to parents because they know their kid the best.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I guess, and it is rare, but it's happens.
Incredibly rare.
Yeah, that parents take that too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this case, like Dee Dee absolutely had taken it too far.
Yeah.
I guess the inference is, and look, we are never going to know Dee Dee's side of the story from this, but from all accounts, she was devastated that Rod had left her, and I just wonder whether this was a cry for attention right from the get-go. From everything I can gather, Rod wanted to be involved in Gypsy's life. He was working, paying child support. He wanted to be involved, but he didn't want to be with Dee Dee. And I think that really upset Dee Dee. She got attention right from the get-go at 3 months of age with Gypsy. I just wonder whether that was the catalyst behind... I mean, we'll go into Dee Dee's past and there's definitely things in Dee Dee's past that inform her behaviour around this time and then into the future. I just wonder whether this was a catalyst that kind of really got that going.
Yeah.
Is that she wanted Rod's attention. What do you think?
Well, yeah, a little bit of that, but also then the other way, I think she got attention for being a single mum too, because she then wanted to really sort of give Gypsy the idea as she got older that her dad didn't want any part of her life, even though he did, and very, very clearly did. He sent letters, he rang, he called regularly, he would try to see her, he definitely had time with her. He ended up having his own another family, and he's got daughter and a son from that marriage, I believe. So Gypsy had half siblings, and so she would go and spend time with them. But Dee Dee would tell Gypsy that he wanted a son, and you're not a son, and so therefore he doesn't really want you.
And that's why he left.
Yeah, and that's why he left. That was always what she told Gypsy as the story. So I think she kind of wanted Gypsy to hate her
dad.
Well, maybe equally hate him as much as she did for leaving. Like, I know it was maybe her way of getting that.
She fabricated other stories about Rod as well, saying that he once threw Gypsy across the room and she hit the wall.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And Dee Dee, like, was adamant that this had happened, and obviously now Gypsy knows that didn't happen, but that was her truth as a young girl. She thought her dad had abused her.
Yeah, but like Gypsy, God, I'm getting these names all confused. Sorry, don't mind me. It must be Friday. Dee Dee hid like letters and things from him to Gypsy, which
And she said he never provided support. Like Gypsy thought that he'd never contributed, but he it's proven he regularly paid child support. There wasn't a time when he didn't.
No.
He even paid more than what he needed to in a lot of instances, especially around Gypsy's illnesses and additional needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about Dee Dee's past?
I think we go back a bit here, and talk about what's informing her behaviour in terms of these medical needs now for Gypsy that ramp up pretty quickly from there. Yeah. Yeah, so Dee Dee was born to Emma and Claude Petrie, I believe that's how you spell it.
Say it, yeah.
Yeah, so she had an interesting life herself. She was diagnosed with a heart murmur at a young age.
Yeah, she was 4, I think, when she was diagnosed with the murmur.
Yeah, so apparently she was basically, her mum overprotected her with this heart murmur and didn't allow her to do much, and kept her kind of wrapped up in cotton wool, I guess, because of this heart murmur. So there's a little bit of maybe that rubbing off on her then maybe in the future of like taking these illnesses a little bit further than they needed to be. But she's also a pageant girl and got a lot of attention for that. From what the family members sort of say, they were very much like Dee Dee was a bit of a brat and was quite rude and obnoxious, and whether that was because she was getting attention from pageants and things like that, but she was quite an unusual sort of kid as she grew up, and then that actually evolved into her doing things like writing fraudulent checks, and she maxed out her mum's credit card after she died. But there was a lot of things that went on with her in terms of her life, and her dad and her mum split up, and her dad remarried, and she did not get along with her stepmom, did not like her at all. Now there is a few stories out there around what happened there, and one that I sort of saw pop up a few times was that she potentially poisoned her stepmom with Roundup slowly, giving her small amounts.
Microdosing her with Roundup.
Yeah, and she did die. And what I found it really hard to find information out, but what I did find was that she died a very slow and painful death.
Yes.
So was that, and it's never been proven at all, but the sort of death she had could have been due to microdosing of Roundup, from what I could kind of put things together.
I feel the same way. Everything that I looked at sort of pointed towards that. Yeah. There's also the conjecture around the death of her biological mother, and the inference that her mum was in a nursing home type of situation, but I think it was more like an assisted living facility. It wasn't a full nursing home, not a full high care nursing home. And Dee Dee would go and care for her mother. She was her
carer as such in terms of that
facility.
Yeah.
Going on a daily basis. The inference is that she starved her mother to death.
She withheld food from her.
Yeah. And her mother as well died what is thought to be a premature death due to Dee Dee's, I guess, neglect or I don't even know, abuse. Yeah. And so she's got that on her hands. She's got the death of her mum, the death of her stepmother. Her dad's a bit of a curious character.
That's an interesting one again, isn't it? Should we get into that now? So there was allegations of later in with Gypsy when she was around about sort of from 4 onwards, I would say, or even from 2 even. Yep. Gosh, yeah. That there's allegations that he was sexually molesting her. I am on the fence of this, of whether or not this is true. The way he reacted, Claude, when he was approached with that as a possibility in the documentary that was done. God, I can't think of the name of the documentary now.
Is this the prison one?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yes,
yeah, which I've got Death and
that's
Dearest and
I know which one you're talking about. I don't think it was that one. I think it was in the Prison Confessions of Gypsy
Prison
Rose
Confessions. It was that one. No, you're right. It was the Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was interviewed and asked about those allegations. And the way Claude responded was that, it was the 4-year-old, her fault. She would put her hand on me and things like that. And
that gave me the absolute creeps. And the fact that he reacted in that way makes me think, oh my God, I can't even imagine what went on.
Yeah.
Just gross. It gave me the absolute heebie-jeebies.
Totally.
I really I don't rate that man at all.
No. I mean, look, and if that was the only piece of evidence of what went on, I would have been like, oh God, this happened. He's blaming a 4-year-old for, this is disgusting. But I think the layer of lying that Dee Dee and then how she taught Gypsy to lie, it's really hard to believe them.
I agree, but I agree. It was the way he answered that question, though, that really made my skin crawl. And
totally
I've just gut feeling. I'm like, well, something untoward's happened here.
Yeah.
We don't know what. We don't know specifics. We don't know.
But that's why you can't get any more out of it because.
That's right. You can't tease out from everything. Even Gypsy admits herself that she has memories that she doesn't know whether they're true or not because they're things that Dee Dee has drilled into her head. And
that's right.
She even questions whether some of what she thinks was her lived experience was actually that.
Yes. And that's where I then go how are we we can't know this.
But if you hadn't sexually abused a child, if someone asked you that question, you'd be like, oh my God, no, that never happened.
No, his reaction really throws a spanner because that's where I can't, until I heard him speak about it, I'm like, like, did that happen? Like, and then the way he answered it, I'm like, wait,
guilty.
hang on, wait.
Yeah, like, honestly.
Maybe there's something here. So it really just throws you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they haven't done themselves any justice, I think, Dee Dee and Gypsy, for what could be truths of what is shit and should not happen. You then can't believe them when they, on these things because of the rest of it all. Like,
that's it.
Yeah.
A family background and maybe a little bit about why Dee Dee became the way she became. Or, I mean, there's a pattern of behaviour over her most of her life.
Pattern of behaviour for sure.
And it and it just ramps up once Gypsy's born, and she's obviously now got this child that she can use to further her cause.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is really interesting, so she was married to Rod for all of 6 months, or less than 6 months, I think it was in the end. She kept his surname.
Yeah. Yep.
That I find really interesting.
Yeah. And look, I guess I can speak to that. For your child, I can understand keeping the surname, and that you'd have to have dad's permission to be able to change her surname. So she obviously wasn't going to get that, and I totally back Rod in that sort of, in saying, well, why would she have to change her name when he wants to be part of her life?
Yep.
Totally. That shouldn't have to happen. So I guess hanging on to it for that reason.
Okay. Yeah. Fair call.
Yeah.
I just wonder, they were married for less than 6 months. They divorced before Gypsy was born. But I see what you're saying. She wanted to have the same surname as her child.
And I think, again, it plays into the fact of how she wanted to be linked to Gypsy.
Yeah.
I think different personality types would be like, I'm done with that part of my life in terms of the link to him. But, that's fine. My kids got their surname, but I'm going to move my life and have a different career or a different whatever, different life without that person, that I can change my name back.
Yep.
But I don't know. She's a different personality to most, I think.
She's a very different personality.
Yeah.
So I guess we're at Gypsy's 3-month sort of age now, and she's had this. Well, so Dee Dee told Rod that Gypsy had stopped breathing. Whether or not that's true, we don't know. There was definitely no apneas detected when Gypsy did a sleep study, but they still gave her a sleep monitor to take home. So Dee Dee's obviously using that. One thing Gypsy was born with was a lazy eye. Have you seen photos of her as a baby?
Oh, no, actually.
So as a really little baby, she does have a really badly lazy eye. And so much so that they interviewed on that documentary that I was just talking about, the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Yep.
Definitely worth a watch.
Yes.
It's recent, but it goes all the way back through Gypsy's life. And they showed a photo of her when she was, I think she was about 3 or 4 months old, and her eyes really lazy. And anyway, they had an ophthalmologist talking about lazy eyes on the documentary, and he basically said, just looking at that, knowing nothing else about the patient, I would say that would need some corrective action because otherwise she would not be able to see out of that eye. That's how bad it was.
Right. Yeah.
And even to look at Gypsy today, you can still see she's got a turned eye, a slightly turned eye. So, so that was a legitimate thing that sort of arose and needed correction. But I would imagine, kids have lazy eyes, are born with lazy eyes all the time.
Yeah, and there is, treatments for that it can be, for sure.
She needed surgery to assist in the correction of that. She was less than 1 year of age when she had that surgery, but that was a corrective surgery. So nothing further.
And warranted.
Absolutely warranted.
Yeah.
Nothing further really needed after that. But that's not where things ended, is it?
No, not at all. No.
By the time, I guess, Gypsy got to school age or kindergarten age, Dee Dee did enroll her in school. She sporadically attended kindergarten and very sporadically attended school up until grade 2 or year 2.
Well, so grade 2 was roughly, I think, when she had the motorbike accident.
Yeah.
Which, when I say motorbike accident, your brain can jump immediately to like a very severe, crazy,
horrific
incident. So this was apparently, though, a motorbike accident that was with her grandfather, Claude, that we were talking about earlier, where the two of them came off the motorbike together, which, from those people that saw this incident, it resulted in a scraped knee for Gypsy. However, Dee Dee rushed her off to hospital, and the next thing you know, she's been diagnosed with muscular dystrophy,
And her leg is in a leg brace.
Yeah.
From thigh to calf.
Yeah.
For a scraped
knee. Yeah. So it literally went from a scraped knee to a severely deteriorating disease that resulted in her eventually needing to then remain in a wheelchair. So it happened very quickly that all of a sudden you have to stay in a wheelchair. You're not going to be able to walk anymore.
Yeah.
Which just is crazy.
So Gypsy's recount of this was one day her mum came home with a wheelchair, walked into the room and said to her, "Get in."
God. Yeah.
And Gypsy, I mean, I guess, when you're young, your mum is everything. Your mum knows everything. You know,
they're your protector. They're going to do the right thing by you.
You trust that they're going to do the right thing by you.
Yeah.
And 99.99% of mums do the right thing by their children.
Yeah.
But in this instance, there was well, first of all, there was no muscular dystrophy. Second of all, so we're going to get to this as well. The way she got the diagnoses she got blows my mind.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she doctor shopped, that's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that documentary I was talking about as well, they interviewed a psychologist. And she's an expert in Munchausen by proxy, which is, we should probably discuss what that is.
Yep.
Do you have a definition written down, do you?
Well, actually, to be honest, I believe there's two diagnoses here. I know she's definitely been diagnosed Munchausen by proxy, which is also known as factitious disorder
imposed on another.
Yeah. So the other one, though, that I've heard being thrown around that potentially is not as researched as Munchausen, is malingering by proxy. So basically the definition between the two, the difference is, so the malingering by proxy is a form of maltreatment that involves the caregiver or who fabricates or induces signs of symptoms in a child, which is similar to Munchausen by proxy. However, the difference is that it is an external, tangible incentive that drives them. Whereas Munchausen by proxy, it's the medical attention that you get from like those that are really sick.
Sure.
So I do believe that she had both going on, because when you think about it, she was building up these illnesses that she was getting attention from more and more doctors, more and more people in the world of, she would get attention from people in the feeding tube community, people from the muscular dystrophy community, those people with leukemia, they would all, want to, evolve around her. And whereas the malingering by proxy is where she would tap into, get houses,
the Make-A-Wish
Disney trips.
Foundation. Yeah.
So
okay.
it's the tangible things that you get from that attention, as opposed to the medical attention that you're getting.
Yep.
So I do believe she had both of those going on for her.
Yeah.
But it's a very hard thing to diagnose. Both are very hard to diagnose.
Yeah.
Because they doctor shop and they don't know where it begins and where it ends and who's getting the right information.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right.
Where does the facts start and the lies begin?
And Gypsy being the proxy, she has actually, like, unknowingly, I think, in a lot of ways, she's contributed to all of that as well. Because Dee Dee was incredibly manipulative in the way she groomed Gypsy to go along with everything she said. So I'm just going to really quickly, actually right now, go through a list of Gypsy's diagnoses.
Yes.
And that way we can, when we refer to them, these are things that Dee Dee was able to get official diagnoses, or she was able to tell doctors and tell Gypsy's care providers that Gypsy had these things.
Yep.
So she had sleep apnea. She had a PEG tube, a feeding tube, which is a tube that's inserted directly into her stomach with a port for feeding due to failure to thrive, and because apparently she couldn't eat.
Yep.
She was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 8, asthma, vision and hearing impairment, including the lazy eye, muscular dystrophy, seizures and epilepsy. At one point, she said that Gypsy was a quadriplegic, which means she had no use of her arms or legs, but then she downgraded that to paraplegia. Now, if someone's a quadriplegic, that's not something you can just get out of and just, rehab out of necessarily. She said she had brain damage, a developmental delay, which she actually called mental retardation.
Awful term.
Respiratory issues, inflamed airways, teeth issues, which were due to medication and poor oral hygiene. She had her salivary glands removed because Dee Dee said that Gypsy was overproducing saliva and she couldn't eat. She had a CPAP machine. She was incontinent. She had a heart murmur, which is interesting because Dee Dee actually, that relates back to Dee Dee's, and she had heart disease, GI reflux, anemia, lung disease, an allergy to sugar and other medication. Now this gets
That one gets me. Did you hear how she got diagnosed with that?
Oh no.
Oh, so Gypsy told this story only recently on an interview. So the way she was diagnosed with that was really interesting. So apparently when I believe it was for the leukemia, she was on a particular medication that turns out she was legitimately allergic to this medication. So instead of going, oh, wow, that's another thing I can, gain sympathy over, she has an allergy to her leukemia medication. Instead of that, she kept giving Gypsy this medication to induce a higher sort of reaction to it so that she was covered in this rash. Went to another doctor altogether and didn't mention anything about this medication that she was on, and said, this is what happened when she ate chocolate. So then she ended up with a diagnosis that she was allergic to sugar.
But her main source of nutrition at the time was Pediasure.
Yes.
Which is literally sugars. It is, it's a high calorie, complete supplement.
Yes.
Which she was being fed to through her PEG port.
Which, she was having that Pediasure. That's for children.
Yeah.
But she was basically on that until she was in her 20s.
She was 23. I think she was still
being fed the Pediasure.
Yep. She had the PEG tube from the time, I think up until she was 23 or 24 years of age.
Yeah. But doesn't that, sorry. So is there not that's a kid's version of something? Is there an adult version that she should have been on?
Essentially sustagen.
Because I'm sure your needs change of what your body requires.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as it's grown.
The calorie needs of a 3-year-old significantly different from that of a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
And also the combination of nutrients. I think Pediasure is recommended up until about 10 years of age.
Yeah.
But Dee Dee wanted to keep Gypsy small and little and like a child. Absolutely. Even at 24 years of age, you look at photos of her and you think she looked like a teenager.
She did. She
a
looked
young
so
teenager.
young.
And she was so little and so petite, and there was not a lot of her.
No, to the point where I believe a neighbour who was actually a year older than her believed that she was she acted like an older sister to her at times, because she believed she was a good 6 years older than her.
Significantly older.
But she was only she was actually she was 1 year younger. That's right,
she
was 1 year younger.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's probably worth noting here as well, throughout Gypsy's life, she never really knew what her actual date of birth was. Year of birth is probably more accurate. Dee Dee told her in certain circumstances that she was born in either 1993 or 1995, not 1991. So she believed she was either 2 or 4 years younger than what she actually was.
Yeah. She actually told Rod at one point when he called to say happy birthday to her for her 18th birthday. I feel for him in this situation. He didn't know what truth was, but so he believed that she was a sick kid, kind of thing. But he rang to wish her happy birthday, and Dee Dee said, "Do not say happy 18th birthday." She doesn't know she's 18 because she's the intellectual age of younger. She basically convinced Rod to lie about her age because of this intellectual disorder that she had.
And also, I think part of her reasoning for that also, according to Rod, was that she had a life expectancy. Well, this changed according to what suited Dee Dee.
Yeah.
But at some point that she had a life expectancy to the age of 20. So Dee Dee's I don't want her to know that she's 18 because she's only got a couple of years. Yeah, that's it. She's only got a couple of years left in her. So he sort of took that on and went, oh, of course, don't want to distress my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and if you're led to believe she has an intellectual disorder, that it's not going to make any difference for her, for this child who's potentially going to die, at a very young age, bugger it, just go along with it and wish her a happy birthday without mentioning her age. I can totally understand that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was basically so that, she didn't have an intellectual disorder, which is very clear to this day that she did not have an intellectual disorder. And she was not sick enough that she was going to be dying.
No.
So
she blows my mind looking at interviews with her now.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's had an education and a sporadic education at that to grade 2. She's then completely, Dee Dee said she homeschooled her. That never happened. She's an incredibly intelligent woman.
Yeah, I think
she's very well spoken. She's considered. She's very impressive considering everything she's been through.
Definitely. And I mean, I think she was coached more than educated. I believe that, you know, Dee Dee would have like spoken to her about how to speak certain ways, how to get the right attention. So I think she's very well spoken because that's what she's done for her whole life is, you know, be interviewed, etc., about her illnesses and all these sorts of things. So she's had to present a certain way. But she's certainly just at the core of her own being an intelligent person because she's got to where she is now. And she seems to be doing well in that. Yeah.
That's it.
But we can get to the now later.
Yeah, we're still a few pages away.
God,
Dee Dee just blows my mind. So in order to, I guess, assist with all this doctor shopping and whatnot, she would move places as well. So this also further isolated her from contact with her dad. And so that's why he didn't necessarily, he would go for a long periods of time without seeing her because they lived so far away from one another. So in August of 2005, they were implicated in Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
So they were living in Slidell, Louisiana at the time, is that right?
Yeah.
And when Hurricane Katrina hit, they were living in a unit of sorts, and their house, like you can see photos online as well of their house was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina, like legitimately. And I mean, anyone caught up in that, it was horrific. It was awful. So they legit, it hit them, but she used it to their advantage then. Well, she did. So one of the things that really got me was she never contacted Rod. And so Rod, about when Gypsy was about 1 year of age, Rod met and then married Christy Blanchard, his now wife. They're still married to this day. I rate her.
So same.
She is awesome.
Yep.
And she really took Gypsy on and took her on wholeheartedly. Her heart is in the right place. She cares so much for her. But she, in the documentary, she is interviewed throughout, and she basically said when Katrina hit, they had no idea what had happened to Dee Dee and Gypsy. They didn't know if they were alive or dead for, like, I think it was over a week.
Yeah, I bet Dee Dee loved that, you know, like that whole idea of people thinking, oh my gosh, what happened to them? Like, but they were safe. The house was, destroyed, but they were safe.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's awful to do that to people.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Like, that's a form of abuse in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But as you said, Dee Dee used the fact that they were in Katrina to her advantage. And by 2008, they relocated to Springfield, Missouri, because Habitat for Humanity built them a purpose-built house.
Yeah, like you know, as in wheelchair access and everything.
Yep.
For this
wider door frames, access like into the shower and toilet.
Yeah.
That sort of, like wheelchair access throughout the house. All of the stuff that
they need. Well, needed
was
in
perceived
inverted
to be
commas.
needed. The house was baby pink with white trim, which really beautiful looking.
You know,
home.
was Gypsy's favourite colour. They, you know, because she was way into her Cinderella and princess and all these sorts of things.
Another way of Dee Dee keeping her like sort of juvenile, I guess, of sorts.
Yep.
Around this time as well, she really started pushing Gypsy sort of into the media. There was a lot of media attention around their situation and the fact they'd been in Katrina. That was definitely a topic that, you know, people wanted to know about, these beautiful, you know, very human stories about of survival and what people had been through. This was around the time she got the Make-A-Wish grant, so they've obviously been given a house through Habitat for Humanity. They went on a Disney trip. They had a backstage pass to a Miranda Lambert concert. The gifts were coming, and people from the community from all over the United States would send them checks, cash in envelopes, but they were just
raking it in. Yeah. She was even awarded Child of the Year in 2007 by, I believe it was a feeding tube community as well. So that would have come with a few perks.
Accolades. Yeah.
And she didn't need that feeding tube. There's kids out there who genuinely need help and money and,
And they were taking it all. When Gypsy talks about like how she was, I guess, involved with all of this, Dee Dee would physically control her as well as emotionally, mentally, all of those things. So she would hold her hand, I say that in inverted commas, and if Gypsy wasn't towing the line or saying the right thing, she'd squeeze so that Gypsy knew she had to, you know, take a step back. Like, it was all unspoken, but Gypsy knew what she had to do in order to survive that.
Another one that I read, it was Gypsy who actually explained this, which I think is awful. And it was her way of keeping her little, was that once she got her period, did you,
Oh,
I thought this was awful.
Yeah,
so instead of showing her how to use pads or tampons, Dee Dee insisted that she wear a diaper when she'd get her period.
Yep.
Like, and at this point, this was right up until fairly late into her teens, and then it's just...
She said that a woman in prison, so again, we're jumping a bit here, but a woman in prison taught her how to use tampons. She didn't know how to.
Yeah.
And even then, like up until she was in her 20s, she was still wearing diapers. Nappies.
Yeah.
When she had her period. She didn't know.
She would wear adult nappies.
Yep.
Yeah.
She didn't. Oh, it's horrible.
Yep.
The other thing, just speaking of sort of that personal hygiene and taking care of yourself, Gypsy said that when she was left to her own devices after Dee Dee's death, she had to learn how to look after herself. She'd never had to wash herself, brush her own teeth, like everything about the sort of self-care and hygiene, none of that had been taught to her.
No.
So as a 20-something-year-old woman, she's learning those basic life skills because Dee Dee had just controlled literally every aspect of her life.
Well, she was literally a little girl in a woman's body at that point.
Yeah. And a woman's body, you know, undergoing changes and, you know...
And probably impacted quite severely in terms of the medications she was on too. Like, I'm sure those medications were doing a lot more harm than good because they certainly weren't treating anything in terms of what they were meant to be treating.
She'd sedate or give Gypsy sedatives if they were going out in public sometimes just to keep her, you know, docile and
looking sick.
Looking delayed for her age, like showing that she has the mental capacity. I think she used to say she's like an 11-year-old, or 7-year-old or 11-year-old. I can't remember.
She basically said she was about 4 to 5 years younger than she actually was. Almost. She but Dee Dee would also self-medicate too at night. She would like take sleeping pills, and so that she was well and truly out at night, which is when Gypsy would then go, well, I can get out of my wheelchair. I don't, you know, like that
I think it dawned on her. Like, Gypsy knew she could walk.
Yeah.
It's not like she knew she could weight bear, and she absolutely would.
Yes.
In the privacy of her own home. She knew she wasn't allowed to walk in front of other people.
She would question it with her mum, but she would just be told, you don't know what I know and you need to stick on this story. Yeah.
In February, so she's undergoing all these hormonal changes too. She's become a woman.
Yes.
February 2011, they go to a convention. So Gypsy was really into, is it like comic type, like a comic convention?
I guess cosplay, you'd call it, like kind of thing. She'd loved, any of those like dress up stuff and like, sci-fi. She was into sci-fi and into Disney. And
because all she had in her life was literally watching movies.
Yes.
Dee Dee didn't let her do anything else.
Yeah, so
she had
Star
no
Wars
friends.
and all those.
So they went to this convention. So Gypsy was actually 19 at the time, but thought she was 15.
Yeah.
And at this convention, she met a 35-year-old man who I think he was there as a stall holder or something.
Yeah, Dan.
And they sort of started a bit of an online friendship.
Yeah, at this stage she had a computer
Yep.
that she was keeping hidden from. Somehow she hid that from Dee Dee.
I think she purchased it when they'd gone to a mall. I don't know how she got the money. I think she got the money because people used to send them cash and she just managed to get her hands on however much money you needed for a laptop back in the day. And she managed to get the laptop when Dee Dee went off to get some food while they were at a mall. And she really quickly made the purchase, shoved it in
back of her wheelchair or something. Yeah.
And then that's how,
So she had this laptop. So she had a Facebook profile, and this Dan, that when they'd met at the convention, he found her online on her Facebook page when he got home. So they started communicating. Yeah.
Now, he was 35 years of age.
And he was told she was 15. As much as she was 19, so technically legal. But from all accounts, like what Gypsy believed, she was 15. And this guy was being told she was 15, which I just find that, what?
Gross.
And it meant that he didn't then just kind of go, weird that I have this attraction to her, like, but she's so young, let it go. He went, oh no, I'll find her online.
I'll pursue this a little further.
Yeah, yup.
They ended up meeting up and nothing happened, as in like the relationship didn't turn sexual because Dee Dee found them.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy how she hunted her down. Yeah.
Hunted her down. I think in the end, she was away from Dee Dee for less than 4 hours. Like Dee Dee was able to track her down and find her. They were at a hotel or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And basically, so this is a direct quote from Gypsy. Dee Dee said to her, "If you ever try to do that again, I'm going to smash your fingers with a hammer."
Yeah. Well, no, she smashed her computer because she found that.
She did. She smashed
the
phone.
computer.
She found a phone.
Yep.
Laptop, smashed them, and apparently at this point also chained her to a bed for 2 weeks. Gypsy talks about this in the documentary, that she was made to go to the toilet in a bucket beside the bed.
Yep.
She soiled herself.
And she was tied up by a dog leash.
Yep.
So that, and the other end was with Dee Dee so that she'd know if she moved.
Yeah. It's just horrific. So, you know, these things were escalating. Gypsy obviously had this desire within her. She needed and wanted friends. She needed and wanted to explore that side of herself. Like, she's a developing woman. She had needs that clearly were not being met.
Yes.
And, you know, what did Dee Dee expect was going to happen?
Yeah. Well, she expected her to stay a child for the rest of her life.
I think she thought that I don't think she thought this through.
No.
But like to this point.
No. That there are natural biological things that occur that mean you grow up and that, you know, you have needs, as you say. And so she was so confused by that. I can only imagine how confusing that would be, to be thinking, why am I thinking like this when I'm this child that doesn't think like that? You know, where are these thoughts coming from, and what do they all mean? Because it's never been explained to her.
Yeah, that's it. She did have that neighbour that you were talking about, who sort of she thought was her bigger sister, but, you know, they're actually very, very similar age. They were talking one day, and this girl had a boyfriend, and she's like, oh, how did you meet your boyfriend? And she found out there was some Christian dating site. And so Gypsy was desperate for a boyfriend of her own. She went on the site. I don't know how she got hold of another laptop, probably in a similar way. But
I think she pinched her mum's when she'd go to sleep because she was so out of it. I think she'd go and get her mum's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she joined up to this Christian dating site, and she met a man by the name of Nicholas Godejohn. And they developed, so this is 2012 now, they developed a relationship over the next 2.5 years, secret to Dee Dee. Dee Dee had no idea. It was all... when Dee Dee was asleep. Dee Dee had a lot of chronic health issues herself. She certainly didn't look after herself. No. She developed like diabetes. I think she had sleep apnea or something like that as well. She wasn't a healthy woman by any stretch of the imagination, physically or mentally.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think Gypsy used that to her advantage to sort of be able to stay up when her mum had sort of passed out for the night.
Yeah.
And start
her life would basically begin once Dee Dee was asleep. She could actually be who she really was, I guess.
And eat sugar and
walk
around,
and contact her boyfriend.
Yeah,
which at 19, or she was older than this. Sorry, 2012. So she would have been 22ish, 21, 22.
Yep.
At this stage, I mean, every 21, 22-year-old.
A boyfriend or a girlfriend.
To meet the person that you want to spend some time with.
Yeah, and I think she had that fantasy too, because she'd grown up watching these Cinderella type movies. You know, she had that fantasy of having the perfect love story and romance, and she didn't have that real life experience of, you know, maybe that's not the way things go for everybody.
Yes.
So she was very naive in approaching all of this.
Absolutely.
And the person she chose, or I guess he was kind of the first person who she sort of started interacting with, he wasn't probably the right person to be.
Even so this Nick Godejohn, his ex-girlfriend actually reached out to Gypsy and said to her, he's really violent, like be careful. And yeah, with her naivety, she was like, oh, that's no way. She's just jealous, and fobbed it off and didn't pay any attention to it. But I think there was some truth to that, unfortunately.
So in 2013, he was actually caught at a McDonald's watching pornography on a laptop.
Yeah.
He claimed to have multiple personalities. He also had a diagnosis of autism.
Yeah.
And he had some incredibly troubling behaviours.
Yeah. He also had an IQ of about 85, which is not.
It's
low,
lower.
but not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tried to hold down sort of jobs and that kind of thing, but I don't know that he was all that successful in those endeavours.
Yeah.
So Gypsy had confided eventually in her neighbour about this secret relationship with Nicholas, and so the neighbour's name was Aaliyah Woodmansey, and she told her that they were planning a future together. They were engaging in sexual behaviours online, sexual exchanges online. He was into BDSM, which Gypsy didn't even know what that was, so had to look into that. But obviously, then
she would have thought that was just very normal too, because she didn't know any different. In her mind, that was like, well, that's what you do.
Yeah,
yeah.
And they spoke of eloping.
Yeah, he was also quite controlling with his behaviour. There was one particular quote where apparently at the end of every communication that they had together, she had to say to him this one particular sentence, which was, "I love and adore you, my Prince Charming, good night." Yeah, so that had to be repeated at the end of every one of their communications, which I find that's really odd. He was an interesting person.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But apparently the two of them, from what Gypsy's account of things, she sort of has spoken about how she spent a lot of time weighing up the pros and cons of the situation she was in, of how she was going to get to be with Nick, whether or not that she could wait out for her mum to naturally pass away to be with Nick, or whether or not she had to do something else to speed that up so that her and Nick could be together. And they sort of mapped out sort of plan A, plan B, plan C sort of situation. They didn't immediately jump to conclusions at first. But so plan A was she basically had this idea in her head, Gypsy, that if only my mum could meet him, and then she'd know how lovely he was and they were meant to be together, and then she'll allow it to happen. So they decided to have this set up a meeting. It was just coincidence that they would bump into each other at this movie theatre, and the whole plan was that she would just start talking to this random person, being Nick, and that Dee Dee would also fall in love with him as being potentially her daughter's boyfriend, and it would all be la la la.
Rainbows and lollipops.
Yeah, rainbows and lollipops. But that's not how it went. They got to the movie theatre and
they were going to see Cinderella. So I think that was an interesting choice for a single man to watch that, ostensibly on his own. But
yeah, I mean, and she'd go dressed up as like the character in the story and stuff, which, okay.
I know.
Yeah. So they rocked up to the movie theatre and, met Nick, and Dee Dee did not like him.
Right from the get-go. Thought he was weird.
Which I kind of go, she's onto something.
Absolutely.
I don't think she was wrong.
Yep.
I've seen interviews with him prior and after, and he's an interesting character, to say the least.
Oh, very much
so. I don't think I'd be, thrilled that my daughter had pinned this guy to be a boyfriend. So, yeah, that didn't go well. But their other plan then tried to sort of come into place. Gypsy immediately realised this was not going how she wanted it to. So plan B was that if Gypsy fell pregnant, she would have to marry him and they'd have to be together. And Dee Dee would just have to accept it then. So they decided to rendezvous in the bathroom of the movie theatre and have sex. So this was the first time for her, but apparently he couldn't perform. So they tried plan B, but that didn't obviously work. And I dare say, to be honest, even falling pregnant for her at this point with all the medications that she was on, I don't even think if they were successfully regularly having sex, whether or not she could fall pregnant, to be really honest.
I mean, she was getting her period, but I wonder what impact the medications would have on a potential fetus.
Absolutely.
She was still on hundreds of medications a week. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. I doubt that would have ever come to a natural and nice conclusion.
So then it left them with plan C, which wasn't the greatest of plans, but no.
So their plan C was to murder Dee Dee because in Gypsy's words, it was sort of the only way out. She couldn't see another way out. So Nicholas Godejohn lived in Big Bend, Wisconsin, which was a few hours, I think, away from where Dee Dee and Gypsy were living. So they concocted this plan that Nicholas would come to the house. They would wait for Dee Dee to go to sleep and fall into a deep, deep sleep. Gypsy would then, signal him to come into the house and that he was going to stab her to death.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happened. Gypsy hid in the bathroom while Godejohn stabbed Dee Dee to death. Horrific scenes. If you want to, you can have a look and see the crime scene photos online. It's pretty horrible. But the thing that I find absolutely disgusting is that after that, Godejohn insisted, or in Gypsy's words, it was a rape, engaged in sexual activity in Gypsy's bedroom following.
Yeah. So I have a different view on that a little bit.
Go.
So I've listened to the police recordings of the interview of the two of them after the fact.
Yep.
There's actually a really good podcast where they really deep dive into it called Monsters Who Murder. So they pick it apart a fair bit. And look, I have to the guy who does the interview of Gypsy is terrible. He's an absolutely awful,
what a hack.
Awful hack.
I know.
A hack is a good way to put it. Yeah, he just was terrible. Whereas the female,
I'm not even trained, and I'd be like, oh my God.
terrible at interviewing her.
Yeah.
And he really, I don't know, in some ways, he jumped from both sides of the fence, to be honest. He really went down a really bad path with her of there's a whole backstory to her of why this has occurred, had no understanding of that whatsoever, but also then fed her to be able to manipulate a little bit, which is what she's been trained to do from the youngest of ages. Yep. So he's really either fallen for her trap in terms of her ability to manipulate, or he's just handed her on a silver platter how she can downplay what's gone on from her perspective, and really put this all on Nick. So in the interview process, she claims, that Nick raped her. She actually says that because she wouldn't allow Nick to rape her mum, she had to let him rape her. But Nick's story of that, who has a very lovely woman who's interviewing him, so there's really no reason for him to have lied about this in the process of the interview. The way it came out it seemed very natural of him of just telling the story, was that when he came to the door of the bathroom after stabbing Dee Dee, Gypsy didn't come out straight away because she was shaving her legs and her vagina, preparing for then having consensual sex. It's interesting listening to it and being broken down as to, which story there is true.
So I've watched both of those interviews, and I fully agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Gypsy's most recent recount of that, which is in that documentary that's just come out, The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose, she says there that she felt she had to have sex with him because he'd done her a favour. Yes,
and I completely see that, and I think that again, it's overlaying piece of this whole issue is how she's been raised.
Yep.
So she has no understanding of really probably what rape is, or what having sex is, and consensual sex at that, BDSM being put into the mix. Her understanding of life and normals in that sense is so warped that to me, she wasn't a 24-year-old woman consenting to sex.
No.
She was still in the mindset of potentially a 15 to 16-year-old girl not knowing what on earth's going on, so she shouldn't give consent. She shouldn't be able to give consent legally anyway. So I put it in a category of rape in that sense.
Agreed.
But
then Nicholas having his limited capacity in terms of understanding the situation as well,
just a whole big cauldron of mess. I know that's where I kind of go, I don't know if I can put on him that he necessarily raped her in that situation, because I don't think either of them have the intellectual ability of the situation.
Yeah.
to label any of it.
Agreed. I think you're right.
don't
I
know.
absolutely think you're right. But I also think it's absolutely revolting that they've just stabbed a person to death and then they're
Having
going
sex.
off and shagging in the
Yeah.
bathroom,
Oh.
regardless of what.
Regardless, that
Yeah.
just seems so. But none of this, none of it is coming from two people who have a sense of normalcy
Agreed.
of
That's
anything of life. Like it's so beyond. Yeah.
So Dee Dee was murdered on the 9th of June. Gypsy and Nick have gone back to Big Bend, which is where
they have to spend a few nights in a hotel first, where they mailed the knife back to Big Bend, so it wasn't traveling with them at the time as well. So it was a lot of like pre-planning and things of what was going on. So there is certainly an understanding of what they've done is wrong and not everything.
Nick lives with his mum and stepdad in Big Bend. They rock up there on the door and they're sort of staying there.
Well, he told them that Gypsy had been kicked out by her mum, and so they were, and the mother and stepfather were really lovely in that, and they were like, well, yeah, of course she can come stay here and we can work this out, like if she's been kicked out. They were just taking in a poor girl who'd been kicked out of her house. Like that's from their perspective, not knowing any of this other stuff.
So Gypsy's walked away from the house. She's left her wheelchair and everything else behind.
Yeah.
But it's not like 5 days after the murder, nothing's come out about it. And so Gypsy, in her retelling of this, she wanted her mum to be found.
Yeah.
She didn't want her to be lying there rotting. I mean, I can't imagine how horrific that body would be after 5 days.
No.
But anyway, on the 14th of June, so 5 days after the murder, Gypsy decides to post. So Dee Dee and Gypsy had a shared Facebook account, and she decides to post on that account, and she just wrote, "That bitch is dead."
Which is an interesting thing to write. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, I guess she sees it from the fact that she wants people to think that somebody has come in and murdered Dee Dee and kidnapped Gypsy.
Yeah, okay.
So it's the kidnapper, the murderer, has written
the
this.
post. Yeah, okay.
Neighbours and friends see the post and become quite concerned.
Yeah, you can actually see the thread on the Facebook post, like of people kind of commenting, going, "I think you've been hacked." Like it was fairly innocent, like, "Oh, there's something going on," and then people going, "This is interesting. No one's answering.
Haven't seen her.
We're neighbours. We've knocked on the door and haven't seen her. We can't get anything. Yeah, should someone call the police?"
Yeah,
like,
and they do. They call the police, and the police actually get a warrant in order to be able to enter their home.
Yeah.
And
well, even before that, a neighbour climbs through a window because the cops can't enter, obviously, without a warrant. So in the middle of waiting for the warrant, the cops kind of go, yeah, well, you can climb through the window.
I'll turn a blind eye.
We're not here. Which I'll go for it.
Yeah.
I'd just have someone do that to me if they want to. So the neighbours climbed through the window, and so they didn't want to go traipsing through the house, but he could see that they were calling out, no one's answering, but they could see that her wheelchair was there, that Gypsy's wheelchair was there, and so they got even more concerned because they're like, oh my goodness, she doesn't have her medications or her wheelchair, or so the kidnappers taken her, and she might be really ill and unable to move to get herself away from these people.
Whatever. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. But then once the police are able to gain entry into the house, they obviously discover Dee Dee's body. She's lying face down in the bed, stabbed in her back.
17 stab wounds in the back. Yeah.
So pretty frenzied attack.
Yeah.
She's clearly deceased and has been for a while. The next post that Gypsy makes from the Facebook account to sort of further her story or further cement her story that she's been kidnapped. The direct quote that she's written is, "I fucking slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so fucking loud, lol."
God. Yep.
So Gypsy's written that. Now, when the police are they've discovered Dee Dee's body, they're like, what the hell's gone on here? They start interviewing the people milling around the house, and one of those neighbours is the girl who was quite friendly with Gypsy. And she actually tells the police, oh, look, she's been in this relationship with this man. This is his name. I'm pretty sure this is where he lives.
Yeah.
And they were actually able to trace the IP address of those Facebook posts to Big Bend and the exact address at which Nicholas was living.
Yep.
And obviously Gypsy was there as well. They've knocked on the door and arrested them.
Yeah, it was fairly quickly and easily.
I think it was within hours.
Yeah.
They were charged with murder and felony armed criminal action, and they were remanded in custody pending their hearings. So Gypsy went to court on the 5th of July in 2016. So the murder happened 2015. About a year later, she's going to trial. She pleads guilty to second-degree murder and receives a sentence of 10 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy around, like there's people who believe all different things. Some people believe she should never have been convicted, never been charged. This is not her fault. She's a victim of a crime herself, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Godejohn's trial didn't happen until November 2018.
Yep.
By which stage Gypsy was well and truly into serving her sentence, and she testified at his trial. And again, you can go and look at the videos from that court hearing or from the court case. It's really fascinating, the things that she says.
Yeah, well, she basically, does say it was her idea, and that, Nick was following her instructions.
Yep.
Yeah, which, because she's free to do that. She's been convicted. She's got her sentence. She's not going to get more for saying the truth. So she sat there and gave a pretty
full, accurate account of what happened.
Yeah. But his attorneys they were arguing that Nick wasn't necessarily innocent. They were just arguing that he should have had a lesser sentence in terms of the second-degree murder rather than a first-degree murder. So that's where they were hoping that we'd get it downgraded to a second-degree murder. Yeah.
Which they didn't.
No.
That wasn't successful.
No.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder and criminal armed action, and he was sentenced to life in prison.
Plus 25 years for the
so he's
criminal. Yeah, which, they seem sort of fairly opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of sentencings. So I know lots of people have fairly strong opinions on both ways. There's people who think that Gypsy should rot in jail for the rest of her life. There's people that, think that Nick got the right sentence. But there's also people who think that Gypsies should be let out. Or that even that there's people today saying, there's hashtag free Nick Godejohn, that he's done enough time because, he's not, well, I guess they're sort of inferring that he's not going to kill anybody else. He was just under the instructions of Gypsy, which I don't know if I agree with that entirely.
If he was able to be influenced by one person, what's to say he's not being, he wouldn't be able to be influenced by somebody else.
Absolutely.
But look, that's the way it sort of all panned out.
Yeah.
There's not a lot about him really. Any sort of recent updates.
Gypsy and him broke up about 12 months into them after them being arrested. I don't know how they communicate through jail with that sort of stuff, but they were still together for some time afterwards. But that ended and fizzled out. And but now even Gypsy, now that she is out of jail, we can say that she served 8 years of her 10-year sentence and was released on parole in December 2023. But but she's now got part of her parole is that she is to have no contact with Nick whatsoever. So she can't, be writing letters to him or contacting him now anyway. But she has openly said that she feels bad for Nick and his sentence, but that she feels he could have said no to her and not have followed through. So and I tend to agree with that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I feel the same. He's stabbed a woman 17 times. Regardless of what had happened to Gypsy, murder's never the answer.
No.
Although, so Gypsy has said, she feels guilty about what happened to her mother. She wishes it didn't happen. She wishes she had been able to either go to the police or go to a family member, report it earlier.
Yeah.
But that's just not the way it was, and that's not the way she was able to act at the time. So
I think it's part of that abuse that she suffered, that emotional side of it, the emotional and mental abuse that she endured, meant that she didn't understand what would be available to her, and that she didn't have a sense that her dad would support her because of the stuff that her mum had fed her about her dad's belief of her. Turns out Dad is the best person ever that would have absolutely been there for her and is so there for her now.
And her stepmom.
They are both incredible people. They've really rallied around her from the get-go of from when this occurred, he's always been part of her life and stayed around. He's certainly kept his face in there. But now with Dee Dee dead, he's able to come in with the truth from his perspective and be able to support her through all of her trial and now beyond in terms of her re-entry into civilization. And I think that, look, because of what happened to Gypsy in her, well, as she calls it, it was a prison already that she was living in under Dee Dee. going to prison was probably not a bad thing for her for 8 years, because she couldn't have even just flicked a switch and turned off all of that stuff that was there.
She says that, doesn't she?
Yeah, that she's had to learn how to, well, literally.
Insert a tampon.
Yeah, hygiene, everything, but interact with people her own age.
Yep.
I think that prison's almost like already been like a bit of a interim transition
yeah.
anyway, because in prison she could learn in a very,
Well, the other
different
thing is
environment.
She gained her education.
Yeah,
so she did
gave her
higher
time.
School. She said when she got to prison, she'd never felt that free in her life.
Yes.
So it was a stepping stone to
Yeah.
what freedom is actually like out in the real world.
Because, if she'd just been let freedom out into the real world straight from what she was experiencing, I think that's the thing. She was finding little freedoms in terms of the evenings when Dee Dee was asleep, and that was leading to her finding people like Nick.
Yeah.
Whereas going to prison, your meeting's probably pretty interesting people, but it's, contained.
Yeah. And she received the help that she needed in there. She received psychological support.
But only a little bit. So Kim Kardashian, sorry if you have a chat with her.
Well, isn't that just quite the delight?
Oh, gosh. So the two of them are apparently going to start working together about some prison reforms things. I'd love to see what that work entails and where that leads to. I agree with Kim Kardashian that that Gypsy could be a great, of course I do, that Gypsy could be a great advocate for the young people in situations like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That she could literally have some great impact on prison reform, having lived the experience of that. Because what she was saying was that she was not eligible for psychological help.
Well, I think she only received, there was only a limited amount, which, obviously she absolutely needed it.
I can't believe that she wouldn't qualify.
Not for ongoing.
Yeah.
No, but the way she talks in her interviews, especially in that Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose, you can tell she's had psychological support.
Definitely.
Just the language she uses, the way that she can sort of see things from a different perspective, you can tell she's had some psychological intervention.
Yes.
But clearly, well, according to her and according to everybody, not by any stretch of the imagination as much as she needed.
Because I think a lot of, her psychological intervention has been from peers in prison, like learning from others in there. And I'm the first one to advocate friends are your first and best psychologists, and they're, usually free.
Yeah. Usually.
Might cost you a
glass of
coffee.
wine.
Yeah, so I think that friends and obviously she's made some, great people in prison have embraced her and have helped her, and that's been a great process for her, and it's worked for her in terms of psychological help. But professional psychological help she definitely needs as well.
Yeah. I think she's receiving that now she's out of prison.
Yeah.
So while she was in prison, she became engaged to a pen pal of hers named, all we knew at the time was his name was Ken.
Yep.
Sort of, she didn't put much out there about the relationship.
Yep.
In August 2019, they'd split. They were sort of on and off, a bit on and off during that time. In June 2022, she announced that she had married a man named Ryan Scott Anderson, so not the bloke who she'd originally had been engaged to. She's released from prison in December of 2023, still married to Ryan Scott Anderson, and then all of a sudden...
Well, it's really quick.
It's like in a nanosecond, she's bloody now pregnant with Ken Urquhart's baby.
So, on March 28th, she announced publicly that she was divorcing Ryan.
Yeah.
On April 30th, she announced that she had rekindled her romance and was back on with Ken.
Yep.
And then in the... July, I believe it was, she announced that she was pregnant with her first baby with Ken.
Yeah. So have you got into any conspiracies online about all this?
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
Bring it.
Last night I was just, I don't know if you're like this, but right before we do a recording, like the night before, I'm always like, oh, my God, I'm grossly unprepared. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Once we get going, it's all fine. And it's all in there somewhere. But last night I was like, oh, my God, I don't know much about this part of her life.
Yep.
So somehow, actually, I do know how, it was through Reddit.
What?
I found this thread that was basically this, or a lot of people picking apart her pregnancy stories and being like, how did she go from being 11 weeks pregnant in July, the 1st of July 2024 to being 15 weeks pregnant on the 15th of July 2024? Oh, my God, she's fabricating dates and blah, 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 blah. But no, I went and had a look into it, her dates do all marry up. the baby wasn't planned, and I just wonder, like, psychologically, being that she's only been out of prison for what now, 8 months or something, is she ready to be bringing a baby into this world with a guy who she's been on and off with but hasn't really been with because she's been in prison? She's also had a marriage in there that's then broken down. Her upbringing was clearly incredibly problematic. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I think she's going to need a lot of support.
Absolutely.
So the one thing that
But I think she has it though too. Like
I think the one thing that really, like, you know, settled my worry about this is the fact that her dad and stepmom are so involved.
Yeah.
And her stepmom is her number one advocate.
Yeah.
Her stepmom's there with her all the way. I think for the fact that she's got that really tight-knit family support behind her, hopefully everything will work out well.
Yeah.
And obviously she's got the lived experience that she doesn't then want to transfer onto her own child.
I think honestly that her stepmom is the reason that Gypsy will be okay.
Yeah.
Honest to God, she has the way she speaks about her is like so beautiful. But she sees her for who she is and the past that she's had, and she talks very honestly around Gypsy's lies, and that is part of who Gypsy was, and that lying was part of her life, and misleading people and manipulating people. And she talks about how they have worked with her to break her of that and to learn how to not do that, because I think, you know, it's really easy to just think that she's doing that on purpose and that she's, you know, that she's thinking, I will lie about this, when I think she's been raised to just think like that.
Yeah.
And therefore not do it naturally. She's not doing it. It's a very natural thing for her to do, to kind of go, oh, you want me to say it that way? Okay, I'll do that. And so I think she's really worked hard with her to like go, no, love, you don't need to lie. You tell the truth. And she's like, oh, God, that must be really hard to then go,
to switch your
how do I
mindset.
turn my brain to do that?
Yeah.
But Gypsy's done really well. The interviews that I've seen with her now compared to, you know, when she was with Dee Dee and, you know, those sorts, and even at the beginning of that, like when she went to prison and that's the thing, from there to now, she's an amazingly well-adjusted woman.
Agreed.
Really impressive. And I think she'll be fine. But I do worry about the baby in terms of, and I guess it's putting it in that way of like, what if the baby does have a medical issue? And I'm not saying that, you know, like there's, I don't know what it would be, but like, and it can be quite minor. How's she going to be perceived by people? Like, even if it's real, because people won't believe her because they think that she'll just do the same as what her mum did. And I wonder if that's playing on her mind at all, of like, how do I approach those things?
You would hope that she'll be able to find medical professionals who are sympathetic to her situation.
Yeah.
And will look at things objectively.
I mean, I know as a teacher that I kind of do the whole like, don't put my blinders on like and think that my kid's perfect, but also don't be that parent who looks too much for things, because I know what I know around child development and what could possibly be going on. So I can understand her a bit in the terms of like going like, you know, I don't want to think too narrowly, but I don't want to not see things either.
Yeah.
Oh, that must be.
I think
she's
got quite the path to navigate. And look, I mean, as we said, with the support of her dad and stepmom, hopefully that cycle can be broken, because we can see that, you know, Dee Dee obviously suffered some of that as a child. We don't know what her mum had endured. We don't know that sort of story.
Yeah.
But obviously this is, you know, a cycle that has sort of been in this family for a couple of generations at least. So let's hope that with them out of the picture,
this will be the end of that.
This will be the end of it, and she'll go on to have a very healthy and happy child.
One thing I do question a little bit, and I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on this. So she's come out of prison, and as you say, she's only been out of prison for 8 months, and in that time, like she's divorced a guy, got back with another guy, and fallen pregnant. She's also had a nose job.
And her teeth done.
Yeah, I can get the teeth done.
Totally.
I really can, because apparently that was really horrific for her, the way it's impacted her enormously
it
medically.
So many things, like her speech, like even just like physically, like her like the formation of her mouth was all ruined.
Wrong. I can understand that a little bit more. The nose is cosmetic. I feel like, do you really want to have more surgeries? Like, and she's chosen to have that.
Yeah, I can understand her having that. Like, you know, there's probably a certain vanity to it because
Well-
she was made to look a certain way for such a long time. And she says now in interviews that she's actually finally happy with the way she looks. So maybe
Yep.
she needed that for a personal sense of, I don't know, of just looking different. But the thing that I actually saw, her and Dee Dee had the same nose.
Oh,
they looked, their
yeah.
profiles were exactly the same. So maybe
Interesting.
she wanted to take
that away.
a step away from that too.
I think it's a little bit too that, I mean, she's someone now who's, you know, she's not necessarily wanted to be in the public eye, but she's in the public eye.
I think she likes being in the public eye.
I think she likes it. Absolutely. I don't think it's maybe like it was necessarily from the get-go where she was aiming for herself.
Okay, yep.
But it's clearly that's where she's going to go, and she'll keep going with that. And I guess, and as you and I both know now that, you know, you're putting a camera in front of yourself more than ever. I guess there is that vanity point of like, you know, well, if I'm going to have to be on screen, I'm going to have to put my face out there. I want to be happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look,
Yeah.
I can understand that. And obviously, yeah, she was clearly okay with it. I mean,
Yeah.
she's gone ahead and had it done. No one forced it. This was probably
No, I guess
something
it was
that
a
she
choice.
had full control over.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have anything else to add to the Gypsy Rose Blanchard story? I mean,
I just good luck to her. I
agreed.
hope that her life is, you know, I hope she gets to have the life she really wanted. And she's admitted she really does understand that Disney love stories don't actually happen. So I hope that she's on a path now. And
yeah, her baby's due in January of 2025. So
Yeah.
I guess watch this space around that
yeah,
too.
I hope she just does like positive things with where she's at now.
Yeah.
Like I hope
Look,
she does move forward with if she's going to be public eye, I hope she takes the route of speaking up for people who are vulnerable and making positive changes.
By all accounts, I
Yeah.
think she has. I think the fact
Yeah.
that she released the docu-series.
I want that in Australia. Where can I view that?
Oh, I don't know. I found my ways. We'll discuss it later.
Oh, I need.
But the fact that she was willing to put herself out there in that respect as well to teach people about her
Yeah.
experience, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
mean, you know, if you had the opportunity to work with Kim Kardashian on prison reform,
I was going to say, if she's going to work with Kim Kardashian, she'll be fine.
how do the Kardashians make it into nearly every episode?
I think this is the third. Like, it's bad. Well, they are everywhere, let's be honest.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, I think that we'll leave it here for this week. But
Absolutely.
thank you to everybody for listening. If you've got any comments or questions or anything that you want to say about the episode, leave it in the comments because we love seeing what people have to say. We love it when conversations are sparked by something a comment people will make. Our next episode is on the Easy Street murders and the two Susas. I find this case really intriguing. It happened in Melbourne, in Australia, and it's a really fascinating case, really tragic story as well. So stay tuned for that next week.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Very excited.
All right. Stay curious, crime besties.
See ya.